It's Wednesday night and welcome to another Undressed podcast. Hello, I'm Jeremy Taylor and welcome to the Wednesday Night Undressed, the podcast that reaches into the wobbly places other podcasts daren't venture. Yes, filmed live in front of our panel for a thrilling threnody of rumbustical debate. Our team tonight include Ivo, Kathleen, Fernando, Lewis, Jeremy, Chris is with us, Alena's with us, and Greg and Margaret are with us. So a new team with us. Strangely, this podcast is actually listened to in Eastern Europe, the UK, and as well as here in America. And as we record on a more somber Wednesday night undressed, we think of President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine. Zelensky could easily have spoken, when he spoke to the European Parliament recently, he could have said what Churchill said all those years ago. He said, "We shall go on to the end, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. And we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." It's interesting, isn't it, that in 2022, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom stands in front of Parliament in the guests' area and gets a standing ovation from both sides of the House. Unheard of. Never happens. Doesn't happen. You know, if we win a war, a proper war, then maybe you might get something. But the question that's coming from... No.
I've been
But
waiting.
it's interesting that I say, why do we continue to ignore the lessons of history? And I learned today through sources that came to me of something which made me rather proud to be a Brit. Because when we do radio shows and things like that, Americans tend to go to AP. If they want absolutely unbiased, they go to the AP. We, of course, go to the BBC. And Ivo knows this, coming from Bulgaria. That's where you go if you want to know. And some of you will know what a shortwave radio is. And some of you who like to mock me when I talk about the last war and lessons we should have learned will know that during the war, the BBC had French-speaking personnel who would broadcast to France, or they would broadcast in Italian to Italy, to the Yugoslavian patriots. They would also broadcast to Russia and even to Germany. They have just started broadcasting in Ukrainian on shortwave to Ukraine. And I think that's rather cool. Nobody really knows about it. It's not something that people are getting very worked up about. But many people will have a transistor radio, what I call a transistor radio. They'll have a little radio somewhere stashed away in the house, in a box.
You mean solid state?
Solid state. Somewhere in the house, they have a little radio that will pick up shortwave. It may even be in their car. But when and if Ukraine falls, which it's probably going to do, and everybody's been out and buried their rifles and things like that, at least we know that they will be able to receive, one way or another, some unbiased news. But I say, why do we continue to ignore lessons of history? Ivo, I have to come to you first, because it's your part of the world.
Yeah.
What think you? I mean, just in general, without getting too deep into it.
So we've known in Eastern Europe for decades that Vladimir Putin always has wanted to reconstitute the Soviet Union and his imperial ambitions. He said famously in a speech long time ago that he considers the biggest tragedy of the 20th century to be the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The 20th century? World War I, World War II, Cold War, all kinds of tragedies, is the most devastating century in the history of mankind, and this is the biggest tragedy to you, you asshole. This might be the biggest blessing of the 20th century, the dissolution of an artificial empire. And so we've known that this is what he wants to do. He's never considered Ukraine to be an independent country. He's never really looked at the Baltic republics as sovereign states. So he is now acting upon his ambitions and his conviction. We've known this. The problem is that we've treated him with velvet gloves for decades. The world, the United States, Great Britain, Bulgaria, everybody. Whenever he did something horrific, like using polonium to poison Litvinenko, assassinate his opponents, for invading Georgia, not the state, because nobody wants to invade Georgia, but invading the country of Georgia in 2008. No consequence. No consequence. Because nuclear power, and horrible cuisine. Nobody wants to deal with Russia. But the Crimean invasion in 2014, even things, trivial things like the organized government cheating at the Olympic Games. What were the consequences? None. They renamed the team from Russia to the Russian Olympic Committee. Are you freaking kidding me? That's the response, the standard response to the atrocities executed by this monster. And so that created a sense, an atmosphere of invincibility. The guy just feels like there's never going to be consequences. And so now this is happening, and we've been waiting for it for a long time. I feel blessed, and my friends and family in Bulgaria feel blessed that we are members of NATO and members of the European Union. So thank goodness our leaders had the foresight immediately in the early 90s, immediately as the Iron Curtain fell, to apply for membership and be accepted. So now we feel protected. But even with this, you have a madman that's in charge of enormous amount of nuclear weapons and has imperial ambitions. So we are very, very worried still. And then also, you asked about, my neck of the woods. We are preparing for a massive humanitarian crisis and an influx of refugees in the hundreds of thousands. So the government is starting to prepare hotels, places where they can shelter thousands and thousands and thousands of displaced people. And it's a tragedy that cannot be mitigated, really. When you're uprooted, when your home's taken away, your memories, your childhood, your friends, your family, it's an unimaginable tragedy. So this is where we are. We reached right back into the dirty ashtray of the 20th century, looking for the unfinished cigarettes by horrible dictators like Stalin and Hitler, and this is where we are, smoking those cigarette butts right now.
You referred to him as madman, and I think most people would agree, but how close is he to complete and public meltdown into insanity?
So I've been kind of, probably everybody has an opinion, but I've been kind of monitoring his behavior lately, and he's becoming more and more unhinged and peculiar, bizarre. So now, if you've noticed his meetings, he has people sitting far away from
weird.
him. The Macron meeting was bizarre. Did you see them at a giant table, 30-foot table? He's in one end and Macron is in the other. They're like, hey, And then he had that Security Council meeting where he was like, again, 40, 50 feet away from everybody. That's paranoia. The guy is scared. And paranoia is, a sign of other issues. And also this, unilateral attack on the biggest country in Europe can only be characterized as madness. This guy, it's not winnable. So
we'll come back to Ivo a number of times during the evening. Chris,
sorry.
I could say madness for him, but I don't think it's quite madness, really. For me, it's I think his statements about rebuilding the Soviet Union are just to keep his people inspired. I think his ultimate goal is deep stabilization of the rest of the world. He thinks that he can cause the world order to flip, that he can, based on some of the stuff that I've been hearing in terms of what he's done to insulate his country from sanctions, the fact that he's got nukes and he's decided that it's time to play nuclear chicken with the rest of the world. He's hoping that the economic sanctions are going to be worse on the West, and that the West is going to be the whiny babies that they think they are, and fold before his people do, who he feels he's got completely controlled. And I think for the madness comes in, I think that he probably feels that he could survive some kind of nuclear exchange.
Nuclear Chicken is a great name for a heavy metal band.
No, there is already.
So you said something interesting to me. You said you thought his end goal was destabilization, and I find it interesting that you don't find destabilization as like part of his route to reunification of the Soviet Union.
I think what he's trying to do is to get the rest of the world to. I think he wants an economic war. I don't think he really wants this shooting war.
To what end?
To get rid of the United States, Germany, Great Britain, to cause these countries to move towards authoritarianism so that they're not free democracies. There was a thread from a guy in Finland, and another thread I read somewhere else, that it's not the fear of an invasion from all these countries around him. The fear was, here's Ukraine, a nice functioning democracy, inspiring people over the border, say, hey man, look at how good they've got it in Ukraine. I want that here in Russia. That's what he fears. He doesn't want that kind of ideas getting into his country, and so he feels that if it destabilizes, he'll do a deal with China, because as long as he leaves China alone, they buy oil. What does he care? It's all these other countries who are telling him, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. He wants to cause the world to go belly up, and since he's got nukes and he's got a big army, he thinks he can survive that and watch the New World Order.
Lewis.
Yeah, I'm not at all sure. Whenever I hear a news story, read a news story, whatever, my immediate thought is like, what is the unspoken like message that I'm trying to get here, that they're trying to give to me? And so I am automatically suspicious when I start hearing newscasters talk about Vladimir Putin being sick or ill. And it may not even be like a function of the news. It may just be that may be the role that he's trying to play right now. He's making himself look like he's unstable so that he can further whatever his goals are. Like, I don't know what the end goal is, what the end game is, other than what the man has said. And if he said he wants to put the Soviet Union back together, like
he's not telling the truth. He wants world domination, not Russia back to Soviet Union. He wants the world.
I don't know that he wants the world, but he wants his piece of it.
Which is all of it to him, to his.
No, not even China wants the whole world. China just wants what was traditionally China, and they'll be happy with that.
I think if Putin got all of Europe together and under his control, he would then take on China. He would want that too.
Not a nuclear armed nation. No, he wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but we're a nuclear armed nation. And
that's why he's playing chicken.
Away.
He's not going to use the nukes. He's got to know that any kind of nuclear exchange is going to leave the world in a state that he doesn't want to live in. There won't be any electronics. There won't be nice caviar. There won't be lots of beautiful women for him.
But
there won't be nice air conditioning.
Chris, we have to go around and have everybody speak. What is being driven home by serious commentators out there, and people who are in Russia, who work with Russia, particularly the ambassador, I've temporarily forgotten his name, but the ex-Russian ambassador, American ambassador to Russia, he keeps saying, your problem, folks, is that you don't understand the way that he, and come to that, Russians think. They think differently to the way that we do. Let's move on to Alena. Let's have an ask of Alena. Let's go. Not me.
About the
hello.
Minor.
Well, why do we continue to ignore the lessons of history? Do you think?
A lot of us never
I don't
learned
know.
history.
I don't know what do you think can be used from history that would
I'll give you,
that would
for
end
example,
this conflict now.
To give you a taster, before the Second World War, Prime Minister Chamberlain went out to Germany, to Munich, and spoke with Hitler. And he came back and he had a piece of paper which he waved around, and he talked about peace in our time and all that sort of thing. They're having meetings right now, Ukraine and the Russians. The Russians don't send anybody of any import to these meetings. I'm just saying, is there anything that we can learn from history appertaining to what's going on in Europe right now? Or the other way around?
I'm not.
You're saying that they were stringing along the Brits back
Yeah,
then,
they
and
were
they're
just
stringing
the-
along the people who are trying to negotiate with them now.
I see. I'm not sure necessarily what to do other than that macro level, other than deal with the situation as it is unfolding and try to find a way to just like stop the guy. I don't know, just stop his colonization of Europe as quickly as possible before it snowballs.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of Alena's question back that makes it really interesting is, well, what lesson from history is that the fact that we are now all armed to the teeth with nukes, it really does change a lot of how conventional warfare happens. I mean, now it's really just done by proxy wars. I mean, at least it has been for the last 20, 30 years. I mean, I think that even this itself is a bit of a proxy war. Of course, people are actually in support of the Ukraine, but also, we've got the U.S. and a lot of European nations not just saying nice things about Ukrainians, but arming them and, sanctioning Russia and doing things like that. It's a completely different type of conflict when you know that everybody's got nukes aimed at each other. You have to simultaneously ride the line of, well, I have to reach my goal, but at the same time, I don't want to cross the line where everybody dies.
Fernando, Brazilian looking things.
Well, there is a lot of development, back to Putin, but I think the scene now it's quite different. I agree with pretty much everything Ivo mentioned about that desire of bring back it's not a new picture, and it's just pathetic and sad to see NATO didn't give any hard step on that. Finally now, if you see in Russia, people are suffering. There is a lot of protests. I know that there is no free speech like here. You can bullshit the internet out of nowhere you just disappear, but they're protesting hard. There is a lot of embargo going on. Finally, they took the SWIFT. We know that I think most of the interest that people were quiet, like NATO and US, was the Saudi Arabia too, is all the energy. And it's not because they ignore, a lot of countries are dependent on those resources. I wish the picture was more different. But I think the scene is different. It's bad that, another war, another freaking dictator, how many times he won the elections? People like him, right? Damn, he's a
Could, of course, all
good-looking
be
guy.
solved by the Queen of England.
Yeah.
She could sit Commander Bond on him. Where is James Bond when you need him?
Yeah, where is the...
Austin Powers.
Gosh.
Don't be silly.
Yeah, that's I think it's a little sorry
Can
to
I
extend,
just
but
want
that's pretty much
to, I
it.
want a quick comment from a new member of our panel, Margaret, who is a particle physicist.
Shaking her head very
Who's a
hard.
particle physicist. I take it that using nuclear weapons would not be a good thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. It just
You would agree with my humble.
I think that's a very common opinion among most people here. It just seems like a lose-lose situation, in my opinion. Nuclear physics isn't my realm of specialty, but from what I very limitedly do know about it, it would cause effects negatively. The ripple effects would just be insurmountable and honestly probably more than the politicians at hand are aware of.
And I think that's an interesting point because we've grown up, Eva and I have grown up, and Chris, because we're old, have grown up with at school. If the sirens go off, you go and hide under your desk, which is actually one of the worst things you can do. And spending a little time in the military, getting training films and things like that. You don't want to. It's just a really bad idea to have a nuclear war, I think.
I thought I'd left that existential, threat and ennui behind when the Soviet Union broke up, and here it is again.
You already created the nuclear chicken band, so you've done your job. You've done an invaluable service to the world of music. You mentioned destabilizing the world as a goal of Lily Putin, he did the opposite. I have not seen the world that united and that stable since 9/11, where we, for a couple of weeks at least, we had the world on one side. United countries that hate each other typically were united. Today, I am amazed because even authoritarian characters like Viktor Orban and Erdogan in Turkey are on the side of the Ukraine, and it's really, if there is a silver lining in this entire situation, this is it. And the other one, of course, is Milo Jovovich, who Putin really
Who is he?
Milo Jovovich is a actress that kicks zombie ass in the Resident Evil movies, and he just messed with the wrong person because that woman's Ukrainian, and I've seen her demolish monsters, giant monsters, numerous thousands of zombies. She's completely indestructible. If she gets involved in that war, Putin is fucked.
Even Tuck Carlson, it's pro-Ukraine now. That's
Be fair, Putin hasn't been nasty to Tucker, So I said, look, let's move on. We have some highly edificated people around the table tonight, and Lewis. But it seems to me, coming from Europe, that it's a sad fact of life that many Americans, where are you going, Greg? Come back. It's a sad fact. It's a sad fact of life that many Americans do not know where Ukraine is, or even France. I'm not saying Americans are stupid or uneducated, but why do so many Americans not know or seem to care about the rest of the world? And I mentioned this to Alena when she came in this evening, and she goes, well, we didn't do geography at school. So amazed.
I didn't. I don't know if other people in their public school system
they
did
don't.
geography.
I did.
But I did. I was never given a geography course in school. If we learned geography, it was in another course, like history, and then you learn a little geography. But we never had this hour is for geography. We don't we're very insular in our education in the United States. And not only are we insular, we only learn about certain parts of American history. There's I didn't learn anything about the gay rights movement until I was out. Unless I was learning on my own in school. Like, you don't learn about the Stonewall riots in school, even though it's a pretty important part of American history. So we're just really insular, and we're kind of have like a propagandistic. Public education. Mm-hmm. I think that you really don't get an education. You get an education, get a foundation, but you don't get an education into non-state line things unless you get the opportunity to go to university. This might be the point.
Yeah, the good news is that sometimes the bachelor takes place in exotic locations, and people get introduced to different parts of the world. To be fair to the Americans, if you ask somebody from France or Germany where Wyoming is, I guarantee you they have no idea what you're talking about. They will never be
know
able,
where America is.
But they'll never be able. But if you look at Europe, it's the United States of Europe now. It's just small countries bound together, basically. And Americans look at Europe as Europe now. And Europeans look at America as America. And I mean, to be fair, even people that live in Wyoming probably don't know where Wyoming is. But literally, you ask somebody in France where Idaho is, it will be impossible that they will tell you where it is.
The trouble is that even Americans don't know where things are.
Yeah,
We got a whole generation of kids coming up who think South America means Texas and Mississippi and Alabama.
Yeah. So we've learned about geography in school, and it was not just learning where the country is and what the capital city is, but we would learn about the way of life in that particular country. And every lesson would be, let's learn about Sudan, and let's talk about Khartoum and the struggle between South and North Sudan. And so, and what is the economy of Sudan? How do they make their money? What are the challenges? So this was geography. Geography was history, really. And I think it's invaluable because you grow up with respect for the rest of the world. And we ultimately live on a very small globe, a very small rock floating in space, and we should consider it just one big country.
Yep.
And we should learn as much as possible about it. I feel like it's damaging that we are not learning. And Alena said something, you asked her something, Jeremy. You asked why we never learn from history. Because we don't even learn history. You know, we can't learn from something that we didn't learn, you know, and we have to pay more attention to the world, not just to American history. And now we are even avoiding American history and trying to unlearn stuff and, not know about the Civil War or institutional racism and stuff like that. This is history. We need to know it. So,
Lewis.
Yeah, I was actually gonna meld a couple of things that Ivo and Alena said, but I think Ivo said it fantastically. It is incredible how much we are only exposed to the company line, the company being what makes America the most money. And so, there's huge swaths of our history, our own society that we ignore in the name of American exceptionalism, and it means the rest of the world gets kind of swept under the rug as well. So, I don't know that there's a succinct answer to either of the first two questions on our show tonight.
But it's interesting that obviously we can't include Greg in this, but everybody else has travelled internationally. Oh, you're still with us. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd come back.
I was a little confused. What is this rest of the world thing that we're talking about?
what is this place?
So
I got the beer though. So
where have you been then? You've been to St. Louis and places like that, have you?
No, nothing so outlandish. I went to El Salvador when I was 15.
El Salvador.
Yeah.
As Churchill once said, the capital of Idaho is North Dakota.
Right. He did, yes.
No, El Salvador is not part of the risk game world map, so I'm confused.
Kathleen, what Americans don't know where Ukraine is, or even France.
True.
We're all quite lucky sitting around this table. We've travelled. We've been around. Actually, I was going to go to Chris. I'll get back to you in a minute, Chris. But, you've been all over Europe. You've been all over America.
I've lived abroad, which is different.
Canada is north of America. Okay, Fernando. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We're not playing games. No, enough. Stop it.
Okay.
Behave. Dear, oh dear. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. You probably want to say that in Bulgarian as well, so that they know what's happening. Go on. Off you go, Kath.
What's the question?
The question is, it's a sad fact of life that many Americans don't know where Ukraine is, or even France. I'm not saying Americans are stupid or uneducated, but why do so many Americans not know or care about the rest of the world?
Because they have no reason to think it will affect them. They don't learn about stuff that they don't need to. And they don't think that there's anything useful for them to gain by learning about other countries or what's going on elsewhere, even where they are. It's just never been brought home to a lot of people that they are part of a bigger world and all this stuff is interconnected. It just hasn't come through.
Chris, do you think the majority of Americans know where Alaska is? I only ask in case Putin decides to visit.
I'd say that a lot of Americans could probably find Alaska. That's a pretty unique one, and it's one of those ones that doesn't actually touch the rest of the states. So,
So what are they
part
going to
of
do
America.
when
But it's-
Putin wants it back?
well, I mean, how does he know that it was his? I mean, the whole idea of Russia, the United States, all these countries is a pure fiction. It's just basically lines on paper. None of this exists in the real world, except maybe for the Canadian-U.S. border, where they clear 12 yards either side of the line so that nobody can build there. But as far as education in the United States goes, I think the real problem is just basically the corporatization of American life, basically, that everything has to fit into this little cog. And, you have the biggest problem is the fact that parents don't have any time with their children after school. That's where I learned a lot of my stuff. Was I'd come home from school and either my mom or my dad would say, "What'd you learn in school today?" And I'd start talking about stuff, and sometimes it'd be my mom, sometimes my dad would say, "Ooh, that's really nice. I really like that. Hey, let's pull up the World Book." And we had a set of encyclopedias at my house, and we'd pull down the book. If it was something that wasn't covered in the class, he'd say, "Hey, I knew this fact," and I'd say, "Ooh, that's cool." And then we'd go through the World Book, or we'd go to the library and check out a book. I mean, I was encouraged to follow any kind of educational trail that I got a bug up my bonnet about.
Just out of curiosity, how many siblings do you have?
I have just one. She's 10 years
Yeah,
younger than I
okay.
am, so I was kind of an only child for a while.
Okay.
Fernando.
Well, I don't know. One thing like that I appreciate a lot the educational system here. I know you guys the bash like big time, but I mean, I think part of the problem, like I understand ignorance. A lot of people forget easy or don't learn too hard. But I mean, overall, like the schools give like some choice here. That's like, it's fascinating. Of course, I can assume that the school district and this county, it's exactly the same in South Dakota. I wish, was something close or above this. And I mean, colleges in U.S., that's one of the big exports of U.S. People all over the world. You can bet the sons of the oligarchs of every country on the planet comes over here and goes to Europe. We're talking about. So, I mean, there is a lot of you guys, I think, you bash too much. The system in U.S. is not as bad. Of course, there is not great stuff. Public, and there is those BS stuff that people want to take some facts off of history, blah blah blah. There is some politicism, that political game, and exactly. But I think overall, I mean, I'm surprised with the amount of choices students have. They can go from music to amazing sports and science.
It's not rigid like in
Right.
Europe
I think sometimes the amount of or that's good and bad.
yeah.
Because okay, I prefer just be part. But I mean, I knew like my daughter was like, there was a LGBTQ group on middle school. We're not talking about high school. In Midwest, I mean, and we are a conservative state. I mean, I need to clap. I didn't have that on my side of the world.
Lewis, you want to come back?
I've quite literally lost my thought, other than to say to Chris that I had the exact opposite experience.
Really?
I had 4 siblings, and so whenever I asked my parents the questions, they would say, "Shut up and go learn it yourself." And so from that, I learned to love to just read, find out shit.
Yeah.
I remember I had a thought, but I can't remember exactly what it was, because I'm really kind of wrapping my head around some of the things that Fernando just said. Because I agree with you. I think that we do offer a lot of choices, but I also feel like all the choices that we offer are crappy. I feel like we don't give our kids the foundation for what they need to make any really, what's the word I want to say? Informed choice. And when we do, we kind of leave it up to the kids, or like you were saying, Chris, the kids and the parents to kind of ferret out the significant part of what they're learning. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Can I
some
just
of that
point
stuff.
out that in today's world, there is a lot more to learn than there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
There are much deeper, much tougher concepts and more things that you've got to wrap your head around than just the reading, writing, and arithmetic.
But I don't think we do that, though. That's kind of, see, for me, I feel like those things are sort of like basically important, and we skip over sort of that fundamental understanding for the sake of like test scores or like funding initiatives for the schools. And
it's hard to get in everything that everybody demands from the school.
Yeah.
And do a thorough job of it. The kids have to be there for 10 hours a day.
That's why the goal of school should be to teach people to think and to teach people to teach themselves.
Right.
But that doesn't fit the corporatist model, because then that teaches people to think for themselves and to say, oh, wait a minute, this is wrong, I want to change this.
Yeah. And I feel the most valuable thing that my daughter learned in school was when...
He's talking about you, right?
It was extracurricular. It was when she signed up for philosophy club, and I feel like it gave her momentum to this day, but it was not part of the curriculum. It was extracurricular, right? But I feel like this really gave you good foundation for where you are today and your opinions today. And I mean, you're studying philosophy now and you love philosophy, but I feel like maybe the educational system is, like Fernando said, it's wonderful that it's flexible, it's not rigid. Like in Europe, it's very rigid and extremely hard, and it's torturous. And, then graduating from high school is very hard. You have to take tests that are on par with the bar exam. It's crazy, especially in France. And
anybody can pass the bar. So,
well, I don't know.
Can you?
Yeah. well, you didn't.
I pass bars all the time. I'm driving down the road.
None of us passed the bar today, but
well, I did pass the bottleneck on my way here. So,
Mr. Taylor, I mean, you are from a small, crappy country. What do you think about all
I
of
was
this
very
stuff?
lucky in that I think, as Ivo said, history started with geography. Started my interest in geography, because to know history, you had to know where things were, or what have you. But also, I had a history teacher, Mr. de Jong, his name was. He was Dutch, and he had a way of explaining things that made sense, made it real. So, for example, if we were talking about a battle in England, he would say to us, how many boys are there at this school? And we'd say 300. And he'd say, right. So imagine the whole school at a rugby match. Then multiply that number of people by, say, 10. So you got a feeling, right? So you got a feeling for how many people were coming over a hill. And he'd say, now we're talking about bows and arrows here. So we're actually only across the other side of the quad there. That's how close the armies were, And you started to get a feel for it. And also, I went to school in Kent, so very close to, I hesitate to say Europe, but France and Belgium and things like that. That's why we sort of got an interest in what was going on. Now, I'm going to give you a YouTube site to go to. A YouTube site to go to. Okay, and then I will repeat this. Pavlo, Pavlo, Pavlo from Ukraine. Pavlo from Ukraine.
Okay.
This is not weird or anything, but I accidentally came across this a long time before what's going on in Ukraine. No. And he had this YouTube thing where he wanted to show people what life was like in Ukraine. Nothing whatsoever to do with what's going on at the moment. And he would travel around the town that he lives in and with his girlfriend, and they would show Ukrainian cooking and how to make things and where his parents lived, and gave you a very good insight of what Ukraine today is like. Pavlo from Ukraine. Now, he is still... It's just YouTube, just bung in YouTube.
Yeah.
Now, he is still posting stuff.
Yeah.
And clearly you get a very good idea of what it's really like there because this guy's in shock. But go to Pavlo from Ukraine, not least because his girlfriend has some really amazing cooking recipes. The clocks go forward on March the 13th. Why do we do this? Is there some
New subject.
Is there some particle physics, quantum physics thing that means that we have to do that, or is it really all about cows?
Do you
Lewis.
think Benjamin Franklin started?
It's
He was
one of the-
American, wasn't he? Benjamin.
Yeah.
Benjamin, wasn't he?
We do it because it's yeah.
Really?
For sure.
And
Well-
I used to like him.
Everybody's looked this
we
up
do
so
it
that they can at least
because
say
it's
something sensible tonight.
American to do it.
American.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yes.
But he would have
No,
spoken
I
with
think
an
it's-
English accent. in
I think
fact.
it's
Why do we still do it, for God's sake?
well.
Habit.
I think
Daylight saving. Save an hour.
the two most prevalent excuses that I hear are A, tradition, and B, cuts down on the electric bill. I am not convinced that it saves anything for electricity, but I'm completely okay to just continue to do it because it's what we've done. I don't have a pressing need to change it, but that's just me.
I think it's as dumb as the 2-minute warning in football. It's
Come on, man, don't be that mean.
I'm going there. 'cause-
Excuse me, are we talking about American rules football or
Yes,
British
American
He
rules
said
football.
football.
Excuse
He
me,
didn't
excuse me,
say
American
soccer.
style rugby.
Thank you.
My favorite though is handball.
Yes. Very good.
But daylight, I mean, it's basically just habit. I mean, and nobody wants to stop it. The farmers, it didn't help them because they got up with the sun and they went down with the sun. Doesn't really matter where our clocks
beg your pardon.
are shifted.
Who is that sun guy?
Did you say clocks then, or did you say something else?
What?
Very
It
rude.
doesn't matter what the clocks say the time
Very
is
rude,
for the
Christopher.
farmers.
Very
My
rude.
God.
And again, time is an illusion.
Those
So
farmers.
why are we even
I wonder
worrying
if they
about
have a
this?
nuclear
it's,
chicken.
It's a pain in the butt to have to switch your clocks twice a year. So
Christopher, that's
pick
enough.
one.
Enough of these words. We're not.
Jeremy.
I wanna talk
Young
and talk
Greg
and
is
talk
going to
and
be.
talk.
He's not going to know where to put himself.
Jeremy, you know how the equator divides the globe in two sides?
The British
Two
side and the
equal,
American
yeah,
side.
two equal sides exactly. That's exactly how the equator divides the day as well. Right on the equator, you have 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night. Always. The further
Tell me
north-
something. Do they shift their clocks?
No, I don't think they do. There's no point.
Really?
There's no point there.
I thought it was
But-
to
Shift
keep
their
in
clocks?
with the rest of the world.
Arizona doesn't.
Oh,
do
they're
anything.
not? Okay.
But the further north you go, the less daylight you have in the winter, and the more daylight you have in the summer. So this shift, I mean, it kind of makes sense as we shift 1 hour from the morning of daylight to the evening, where people are supposedly more productive. I don't know. I mean,
It doesn't give them any extra light in the North Pole or anything,
Why don't we shift the time we start things? I mean, why can't school shift in time throughout the year? If we're worried about kids walking to school in the dark, just change the time that school starts.
This isn't Back to the Future, Christopher. This is.
It was a fun
You've
movie.
been watching
but
too much Doctor Who, haven't you?
I love Doctor Who. Time travel is a wonderful fiction.
Alena, when you lived in Chicago, what time did it get dark in the winter?
She didn't know she
Like,
wasn't up during the
like
day.
3 p.m.
3 p.m.
Yeah,
it got
like
dark.
3 p.m. It sucked.
So
It was awful. Yeah.
December, January, February, 3 p.m. it's dark.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 months out of the year.
And that I'm sure they appreciate, 1 extra hour.
I don't know. I just
Appreciate.
I just feel like the time thing threw me off, and it was dark early at night. Like I'm confused about time, and it's dark early at night. That's all I feel like happened when they changed the
I think to
clocks.
be fair to Alena, it must be very difficult being Evo's daughter because Evo doesn't do time. Right? And so
Yeah.
I've
is so
often
true.
wondered
Yeah.
when we
You
were
have no
doing
idea how
when we
you
were doing
are.
broadcasting together. I often wondered how it was that
Oh, for the
I have
first
my own time.
before I
I'm
went to
Dr.
school
Who.
for the first 6 years of my life, 5 years of my life before I went to school, we were just like there was no. We woke up when we woke up. We were
We're awake.
places
We're
we don't know why. We were, I had no idea. I had no concept of a schedule.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as a result, she thinks her school was a disaster. She thinks Square square root is a gardening concept.
Yeah. Exactly.
Score on to Eva. Greg. Oh, sorry, you got your mouth full. All right, let's go to Lewis.
Is there a question?
Yes. Clocks going forward.
Why do we
question
I answered
we've
the
already
first?
answered. I think Lewis probably got it right in terms of like those are the two explanations, and I also don't find either particularly compelling, especially the tradition one. I don't know that there's really any. That always kind of annoys me when people say like that's the justification for something. Yeah, tradition. Yeah, it's like well, but if we could do something more efficiently, why wouldn't we do it that
When
way?
you were at lawyering school, or are you still there? I'm not sure. But
Lewis is closer to it. Than
yeah,
me.
and look how old he is. So probably doesn't bode well for you. My question is though, could
At
you
this
make
table, yeah, that makes
could
sense.
you make an argument if you were employed by some I don't know outfit millionaire farmer who says, you know, I want you to go and change this clocks thing. You know, it's happened in a couple of states. A number of countries don't change their clocks.
I feel like it'd be more of a lobbying thing necessarily than like a legal thing. Although, frankly, I think it's a state by state thing. I mean, that's why Arizona is the way it is. So really, we need to be complaining to our state legislatures. I think is really.
I got a better idea.
we need to make this a major voting issue.
Why don't we just work on making me emperor, like we've talked about before,
right.
and then I can just institute like a standard time across the entire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what that should be the platform for your campaign towards emperorship.
Campaign?
Is like
Do you really campaign for emperor though?
your domination.
I like domination.
Yeah,
that works.
I cannot support that. I do not support any emperor. As much as I like you, Lewis.
Okay, well, what we're going to next question. I'm going to bar
Because this was getting weird.
I'm going to bar Evo. Evo is not going to be allowed to comment on this next question. Is knocking Russia off the world sports stage going to have any real effect on the current European crisis? Is knocking Russia off the world sports stage going to have any real effect on the current European crisis, Lewis? Well, we've got to let Evo say because he's going to get upset if we don't.
So
He's gonna get,
I
he
feel
really
like
is.
the question is like is kind of misleading because that's not the only thing that's happening. Like there's this concerted push like all over the planet of everyone that's like trying to at least express in whatever way, in whatever little like fiefdom that they have power, that they think that what Vlad did is wrong. And
But we're specifically talking about sports here.
right, but I think that you can't just specifically talk about sports. I think that if the question
I'm
is,
the host.
I will fight you.
Name on the door.
Fight.
I think
British.
that if we are talking about removing Russia's the prestige that Russia gets from sporting events as one of the aspects of sanctions that are being placed against Russia, then yeah, I think it's going to do it. But I think if that was the only power that we had, no, I think by itself it would be a horrible misuse of effort. But that's not what's going on.
Well, just
Kathleen.
as a note, Russia's the only one who thinks they get prestige from winning at sports because everybody else knows they cheat all the time. So nobody really respects them for that anyway.
Chris.
I agree with Lewis. On its own, wouldn't have that much effect, but as an additional, bit of pressure, I think it's worth it. I mean, it's saying to Russia that if you want to play and be a part of the world community, you got to, respect the rules that we all agree to live by. And I have to say that I'm quite proud of Roman Abramovich, who's decided to sell Chelsea and to insist that the funds go to Ukrainian relief.
Now, I'm going to come to Evo in a minute. I am, but I want him to be last, Greg.
I think that this is one of the things that doesn't really have a lot of impact on the Russian government. I mean, we're talking about a military conflict. What is banning somebody from playing a sport going to do? But I do feel like to whatever extent shifting opinions in the Russian populace would have an impact on the government. Because, I mean, it's democracy, right? To what extent it would have an impact there, I think that's probably helpful. Again, another thing
Fernando.
to add.
Well, I think that's it's important, and I feel bad for the for the sports, all the
Sports people.
sports people, the athletes. However, that helps to make things boil more. Like Russia already, the protests, like that's great. For example, in Brazil, if you stop like soccer, take them out of FIFA, they would kick Bolsonaro the day after. Period. That's, you're not gonna take 24 hours.
That's true.
So, and just one sport, so that's it helps, besides it's another sort of embargo, like not just normal sports, but Formula One got embargoed as well. A lot of companies putting out, that's gonna just help the boil to the protests, like to escalate and go against like the dictator. So
Well, let's go to Eva because
final
we
word.
sorry. I'm sorry, the ladies.
I don't have anything to say. Can I ask a question? For maybe you can answer it if it doesn't mess up whatever you wanted to say. What is there with this sports question? Is there some kind of link between fascist activity, fascist nations, and a high amount of like athleticism and athletic like program that's very strong? Or is that something I've imagined, that fascist nations promote athleticism?
No, it's true. Autocracies are huge on sports and developing government programs for sports. I mean, we see it with China right now. It was like that during the Cold War. Bulgaria is a tiny country with like 7 million population. In Seoul, in the Summer Olympics, we're like in 4th place. And this was all government designed. It was drugs, anabolic steroids, a very good cheating program, and developing artificial sports program that, the populace is not really fit. It doesn't participate in sports, but there's a handful of almost genetically engineered athletes that are supposed to generate and manufacture prestige for the regime. And we see this in Russia. It's a huge thing. It's a huge device for Putin. It's not a coincidence. Twice he invaded countries immediately after Winter Olympics. He waited for the Sochi Olympics to be over so the gold medals would not be taken away from his athletes. And the same thing happened this time. So there is unwritten rule in the Olympics that was set up in ancient Greece during the ancient Olympics that states that during Olympic Games there's no wars, no invasions, no aggression, no wars. Everything stops and there's a truce. And Putin this time he broke that rule because the Olympics are considered over only when the Paralympics are over. He showed how little he cares about the Paralympics and the disabled athletes by attacking the country immediately after the regular Olympics ended. And so he got his medals and he attacked. So autocrats are huge on this bullshit. In Nazi Germany, like Alena said, 1936, the Olympic Games took place in Germany in the midst of National Socialist rise. And Hitler used this. Are you familiar with Leffi Riefenstahl? Mm-hmm. Leffi Riefenstahl, the great movie director that manufactured these huge propaganda movies that involved the superiority of the Aryan race and the athletes of the Third Reich and all that stuff. Well, Putin is doing kind of the same. And it's encouraging that the world of sports, the organizations are reacting correctly this time. IOC is a notoriously corrupt organization. The International Olympic Committee
Or FIFA.
And FIFA are very corrupt. Both the biggest two sports organizations are extremely corrupt. The IOC did this like slap on the hand with after the invasion of Crimea and the cheating scandals Like I mentioned already about the Russian Olympic Committee is the name now of the Russian athletes, and they don't play the national anthem. Big deal. That's not a real consequence. And
Yep.
so, but this time, they're doing the right thing. Gazprom is a huge company, one of the biggest oil producing companies in the world. Gazprom has a stadium in St. Petersburg named Gazprom Arena. At Gazprom Arena, because of a lot of money, they were supposed to have the biggest one-time event in Europe. The Super Bowl of Europe was going to take place this year in Gazprom Arena in St. Petersburg, the European soccer final. Well, UEFA, which is super corrupt, immediately said no. We're moving this to Paris. Bye-bye, Gazprom. For Gazprom, this was very important because it was going to generate enormous exposure for them. So they lose this. Schalke 04, a famous German soccer team, they had Gazprom as sponsors on their jerseys. They dropped it. Lukoil is another Russian company. They're here in the United States as well. They're being dropped by sports clubs, sports teams as sponsors. So Sebastian Coe, the great track and field athlete of Great Britain, is the president of the International Track and Field Federation. He had a very, very, very sharp statement about the invasion of Ukraine, and he banned Russian athletes from competing. Sergei Bubka, by the way, the great Ukrainian pole vaulter, is the vice president, very close friends with Sebastian Coe, and they together made an incredible statement. Athletes are refusing to play. Russian athletes, tennis players, are refusing to play. The World Cup qualifications are right now. That's huge.
Yeah, Russia's out of that.
Yeah, out, and teams just refuse to play them. So this doesn't seem like much, but to somebody like Putin, it is a lot. And for the Russian people, it's that little halo. They had that feeling of superiority, and this is being taken away from them. In addition to all the other things and the economic blockade, which is really a World War III.
What I'm concerned about is that you cannot just economically starve a nation, turn it into a ghetto, and then expect them to not turn on each other and turn on the world.
Happen because of that. Yeah. Starving. You're right. This is how we ended up with Nazi Germany because of the reparations. The reparations after World War I bled the country out, and people just had nowhere to go.
Yeah,
it's complicated.
But do you think it's going to make, because Putin is anal about sports?
Yeah.
Is it going to make a big difference, do you think?
I'll tell you what hurt Putin the most. I don't know if you know this, but Putin is a very, very good judoka, which means he's a judo athlete. And he is the honorary president of the International Judo Federation. He's the president. The Judo Federation stripped him of his presidency, and immediately. And this hurts him personally because judo is huge part of his life. So I feel it's hurting him. It's pissing him off. He's starting to realize probably he made a mistake. And I wanted to address something that you said earlier about him trying to take over Europe. And I think he was already there because Russia was integrated in the financial institutions of Europe, deeply integrated. The oligarchs were in control of so much of Europe, like Roman Abramovich, the aluminum king of Russia. He was the owner of one of the biggest clubs in the world, and he was also doing enormous amount of business in England, and so were all the other oligarchs. The pipeline.
The real estate in London is.
He made, with the pipeline, he was about to make Europe subservient to Russia and energy dependent to Russia. So he was there in a more sophisticated way. Their tentacles were all over Europe, and they were controlling also the narrative, the political narrative. They promoted the right in France, in Germany, the extreme right, and they were doing politically incredible things. Now, it's a step back. He's going to lose all the stuff that he's so well developed.
Your point made me think about talking about earlier about why we ignore the lessons of history. Part of it is because we didn't learn anything because we're still in that mindset, and Putin is definitely still back in a old Cold War mindset. He can't.
He's back in 1975.
Yeah, he can't. He needs to have kind of the land and the power. He can't see that. Well, he already had it. He already had. It's better to rule with. You catch more flies with sugar than you do vinegar. He just needed to keep being the sugar king, and he would have been just fine.
So one more thing, and then did she manage to do the sponsors this week?
Susan sent me something. I don't know what.
Well, we'll have a look at that in a minute. No, I'm personally. This is me, Jeremy Taylor. I'm thinking of attempting to go communication device and online free for 7 days, except maybe for an emergency landline. What issues am I going to be up against? Although not during the current European crisis, I've added subsequently, but I'm practicing for when the Russians do in fact decide to visit Alaska. And in fact, does anyone still have a landline? Lewis,
just before
mock.
Lewis chimes in, is landline the stuff that's on the football field, like around? What is that?
No, it's a James Taylor song.
How are you going to watch porn?
Oh, shit.
What are you talking about? The pictures?
You watch porn on your landline?
Just hook
No. I thought he was keeping the landline.
He's gonna print out a bunch of stuff before he starts.
Oh, you can take it analog. Thank you.
Yeah. But in the days before
I've heard
digital,
there were magazines.
there were these magazines.
Magazine.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna have to
Pictures.
do some research.
Cameras, still pictures as opposed to moving pictures.
Playboy used to be
Magazines
magazine
and
called.
stuff you put in your
Kathleen.
AK-47.
How many people here actually do have a landline?
Only if you want them to stop
We
working.
do. Yeah.
My parents do.
Your
Wow.
parents do, of course.
Good for you guys.
Well,
Well,
we
you don't.
had to for a while.
Margaret doesn't.
We're out in the country and get crappy reception,
Does
and our
Greg have
electricity
one?
goes out.
No. Chris, do you have one?
Well, when
I
the
had one for a
electricity
long
goes
time,
out
but
and
we
you have
But
a
you do
landline-
not have one now.
No,
Would you mind?
I'm trying to get an answer to the question.
When the electricity goes out and you've got a landline, you've still got a telephone.
Understand.
Yeah. And it was the only way our burglar alarm hooked up for quite a long time.
Alena, do you have a landline?
Oh, no, of course not.
Don't laugh at me. Lewis, have you got a...
I'm pretty sure that we have. No, when we bought the new system, it was completely cellular. So
Evo, do you have a landline?
Why wouldn't I? I mean, otherwise my phone modem wouldn't work. How do I get on the internet without it?
How are you gonna connect to AOS?
How am I going to connect to AOL?
Fernando, do you have a landline?
Of course not.
Oh, God,
As
I'm
a
old.
telephone engineer, I abdicated that like 15 years ago.
No, Chris doesn't have one.
I had one up until about 5 years ago.
Even our particle physicist doesn't have one.
If you want to go device free, I recommend that you go camping somewhere. I can know at least I have several trips that I could recommend that would be worth it.
All right.
Camping, a tent.
Camping.
Oh, right.
Hello, sweetie.
A tent, you go
Oh, you
hike
don't mean
into
that
the
sort of
wilderness.
camping.
You know,
Right, okay.
carry all your food with you.
All right, Evo, we've gone through a very interesting series of questions today.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to know why you have an extra large cassette tape on your in front of your microphone. Oh, it's a telephone.
It's telephone.
Oh, right.
Just,
It's with
I'm
a picture
inspired
of a cassette on
by
it.
yeah.
Cool.
Well, you know how usually we get our content for the commercials on tape, and we have to play it on cassette tape because we don't have any other equipment.
Yeah.
The cassette tape's long broken, by the way. We don't have a cassette player anymore.
Dear.
I have one.
You do have one?
Yep.
We might need to borrow it because every once in a while Susan sends me content on cassette tapes.
How about 8-tracks? Does she ever?
8-track, the 8-track, we had an 8-track.
They still make those.
We had an 8-track advertisement endorsement a couple of weeks ago that worked actually, but now that's broken. The reel-to-reel magnetophone is gone too. It broke too. And we've had throughout the years, because we are our finance department is always in the red. So we don't really have any funds, and we've had
fun.
ads delivered by smoke signals, by a telegraph, carrier pigeon. Yeah, the pigeons were very popular until they died. And telegraph. The telegraph was good. Last week we had our copy was delivered by a Roman legionnaire. So I don't know.
He was a Russian oligarch as well, wasn't he?
I got something this week. Let me see what Susan sent.
Does that mean you'll be getting updates from Marathon here sometime soon?
Quite possibly. I don't know. I mean, let's see. Yeah, it's interesting because for the first time in a long time, it's written copy. There's no, thank God, I don't have to push a button and listen to some horrible bullshit on a cassette tape. Finally, I'm just gonna have to read it. And to answer your question, it was delivered by you're right. It was delivered by a wounded Spartan warrior.
Those hoplites were tough.
Who drew his last breath as he delivered the message. So let's see. Today we are sponsored by. Oh my God, that's a huge surprise, guys. This is a first for sure. We're sponsored by a worldwide web institution, the legendary, the one and only Yelp.
Ooh.
What is Yelp? For those of you who have been living under a rock or inside Jeremy Taylor's body, Yelp is a legendary publisher of crowdsourced reviews about businesses. It is incredibly popular around the world for providing instant feedback pathway to the inquiring consumer. Today, inexplicably, Yelp has connected with our own advertising maverick psychopath, Susan. And will sponsor the podcast. I am being informed right now, that according to the contract that Susan signed using the blood of a Carpathian goat, no money will be exchanging hands. Of what else is new? Instead, Yelp is providing us with an elite selection of Yelp reviews of our podcast.
Oh no.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm tired of recorded messages belittling us, like that asshole from 1917. Remember that guy, or Greta Thunberg, or those assholes AI, and finally we just Yelp reviews. That I'm going to read. But it says here they're special because Yelp is calling them Wednesday night unexpected. These apparently are reviews that have unexpected endings. They end unexpected. So we'll see. Okay, then it's a written copy, and like I mentioned, we can't pay for mail service, so it was hand delivered by a wounded Spartan warrior. And here it goes, the first one. Well, I gave the Adam Carolla podcast 1 star. That's a Yelp reviewer. I gave Mark Maron podcast 2 stars. I gave Radio Lab 3 stars. I gave This American Life 4 stars. And to Wednesday Night Undress, I can give no less than 5 black holes. Another Yelp review here. Thank you. Wednesday Night Undressed is essential part of my favorite dreams. Signed, Freddy Krueger. Motherfucker. I was hoping for a good one. Oh, this one starts good. Let's see. There is no better feeling in the world and better relief than when Wednesday Night Undressed is over. Motherfuckers. Okay, this guy says, downloading this podcast is like eating a sandwich of peanut butter, jelly, and plutonium-357. Oh, this motherfucker. Let's see what he said. He says, some people have IQ points. The Wednesday night undressed podcasters have IQ decimal points. How dare that asshole? This guy says simply, Wednesday night undressed is the exact opposite of why podcasting was invented. This guy Yelper here says, hello, I'd like to thank Wednesday night undressed for saving my life. The other day, I ingested by accident a deadly dose of cyanide. Miraculously, this particular podcast started playing in the background, and I vomited every drop of the toxin, as well as food I've eaten as far back as 8th grade. This Yelper here says, I love listening to this podcast when I drive off a cliff. And another one here says, oh my God, I highly recommend it. This podcast has made my job so much easier. Fuck, signed Dr. Kevorkian. No, this guy starts promising. He says, this podcast is a great place to forget a horrible memory and everything else you've ever learned. This guy says, I was so shaken by this podcast, I wrote a song that was a desperate plea to the members of Wednesday Night Undress. Signed, Paul Simon, author of The Sound of Silence. Fucking asshole, Paul Simon. Oh, this one is by the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar wrote a Yelp review. It says, I've been stubborn for centuries, but this podcast is so powerful, it moved me to change. From now on, I will have 313 days. That's 365 minus 52 Wednesdays. Fucking Gregorian, fucking... This guy says, if you're interested in a wealth of information, entertainment, and valuable news, by all means, do not listen to this abomination of a podcast. All right, this guy says, hello, nothing in my life has ever made me feel weirder than Jeremy Taylor's introductions. Signed, Regan McNeil from the movie Exorcist. Holy shit! Nothing made her feel weirder? Oh my God. Hi guys. I overheard once your sponsorship presentation by Greta Thunberg. Whoever did this endorsement, I think I can help him. Signed, the actual Exorcist. And this one says, hi guys, I was born without hearing and recently had cochlear implant. For the first time in my life, I was able to hear the songs of the birds, the gentle rustling of the leaves, the operatic bellows of the summer wind, the totality of nature's symphonic ambience. But the true value of the implant was revealed after I heard your podcast and realized I can turn it off forever. This one says, hello, my dear friends. Your podcast is spectacular. I can't wait to see every single one of you. Signed, Satan.
God.
This one simply says, Hurricane Katrina has higher ratings than Wednesday Night Undressed. This one says, many blessings and thanks to the panel for keeping the homeland safe. This podcast has been the most powerful device in our toolbox. Signed, the Enhanced Interrogation Team at Guantanamo. Dear God. Oh man, those guys are assholes. And this one says, hello, my dear friends. I also can't wait to see you. Signed, Jeffrey Dahmer. There's another one. Dear friends, there is nothing more rewarding than to come home, get comfortable, stretch my legs, pour myself a glass of single malt scotch, turn on Apple Podcasts, and not listen to your podcast. This guy's, oh, that's interesting. He says, you know what's more likable than the members of Wednesday Night Undressed? It's that woman that comes out of the TV in the movie The Ring. Man.
I'm sensing a theme.
This guy says, hi, this is Russia. Ooh, Russia wrote a Yelp review. Just wanted to say that I would never attack New Zealand. They're not in NATO and they're not a nuclear power, but our intelligence indicates that their military has been stockpiling episodes of Wednesday Night Undressed and are not afraid to use them. Oh, wow, this is great. Oh, no, it's not great. I have never, ever felt worse in my life than after listening to Wednesday Night Undressed, signed John Wayne Bobbitt.
Nobody remembers.
Only the old men in this will remember this one.
He's never felt worse. Kudos to Wednesday Night Undressed. I am Nereus 4660, an asteroid the size of the Eiffel Tower. On December 11th, I was on collision course with Earth when a communication satellite broadcast one of the many episodes dedicated to the driverless cars and peppered with anecdotes about Winston Churchill. This might have saved the Earth because I was so scared of the panel's unbound idiocy, I decided to swerve and avoid the fucking planet altogether.
Yay!
Furthermore, I decided never again come close to Earth, aka podcast hell, after realizing I will inevitably hear this horrible joke by that imbecile Evo. Wait for it. And this space rock must have been completely petrified. And this is the last one. He says just, oh, that's nice. He says, everybody chill. For the love of God, you're piling on these poor podcasters for no reason. There are worse things in life than an episode of Wednesday Night Undressed. Namely, 2 episodes of Wednesday Night Undressed. Thank you, Yelp. You motherfucker.
Yay! All that remains is we want to thank our sponsors, and from me, Jeremy Taylor, to say thanks to our Naked team tonight for listening. And remember what I said. If you're interested, go to Pavlo from Ukraine. Pavlo from Ukraine on YouTube. And I want to thank the team tonight: Evo, Kath, Fernando, Lewis, Chris, Alena, and Greg and Margaret for joining us. Our producer tonight is Neil Rasmussen. And don't forget that in a day or two, you'll be able to pick this up on Facebook at all sorts of other places where you can get your favorite podcast.
And don't pay any attention to Yelp, because backwards Yelp is plit.
Thank you for those small words. They'll probably ask for their money back now, Kathleen. But again, thank you very much for listening. Yay!
Woo!